Federal government is suing small landlords in New York for denying a tenant an emotional support cat. But there's more to the story. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. Alright, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it has to do with the whole emotional support animal issue. Okay, so I covered a article recently about how Texas was passing a new law that made it just more difficult for tenants to claim that they had these emotional support animals. Basically, they had to get proof and evidence to the landlord in order to actually qualify for these protections, because there's so many tenants out there right now and they're just getting these fake online certificates claiming that their pet is an emotional support animal. They're not actually service animals. They're not actually helping these people, but they just want to have a pet. They don't want to have to pay the pet deposit or the pet rent, and they're trying to just basically get around the landlord's rules and regulations. So there's a lot of reasons why landlords do not want tenants to have pets in their properties, because pets do cause additional damage, okay? That's one thing we all know. We all know this. I own a dog. I've seen the scratches in my hardwood floor. My dog has, peed and, took a dump on my carpet many times, etc. And some pets are rougher than others, When we're talking about cats, sometimes they will spray the walls with urine, there's a lot of issues, and if nothing else, it will take extra cleaning to get the place, back into rent-ready position after the tenants move out. So yeah, we're going to want to charge a higher rent or a pet rent, or charge the tenant a pet security deposit in case something becomes damaged due to these pets. So when they try to scam us, and many landlords have been, they faced scammers before, so they are not trustworthy. They do not believe the tenant if they just claim that, hey, this is an emotional support animal. We need proof, we need evidence, and there's more to this story of these landlords getting sued. It's bad. It's bad because this isn't some big corporation. This is small mom and pop landlords who own a duplex, okay? And they are getting, the federal government is going after them like they are the biggest criminals in the world. And I hate seeing stuff like this, okay? This is the kind of stuff that discourages small mom and pop landlords from even wanting to be in business. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, leave a comment down below, and let me know what you think. So, do you believe that landlords should be forced to accept emotional support animals? I don't. Okay, I understand that, people with disabilities are supposed to receive reasonable accommodation, but I don't believe that a pet or an animal living inside your property, if you don't want them there, I don't believe that's a reasonable accommodation. Okay, it goes far beyond reasonable when you have this other thing up in your property, be it I've seen the ridiculous stuff like emotional support peacock, emotional support boa constrictor, just ridiculous stuff. And I believe that it's not a reasonable accommodation for disability. 30, 40 years ago, before any of this ridiculousness existed, nobody had no emotional support animals at all. Okay, so that tells you right there that this stuff isn't necessary. It isn't necessary in order for these people to do well. And if they do want to have those animals, then they should have to pay the pet security deposit and pet rent just like everyone else, because that's what they really are. The only exception I would say would be service animals like a seeing eye dog. Okay, like literally the person is blind, the dog is guiding that person around. Okay, this emotional support stuff is nonsense. It is a scam. It is a joke. I don't believe in it. I tell everybody, follow the law. Do what the law says, but it's very discouraging when you see the federal government going after small mom and pop landlords. But anyway, let's get into the article and see what it says. This article is coming from Reason.com, and it says, the feds sue New York landlords for not allowing a tenant's emotional support cat. The Department of Housing and Urban Development argues in its complaint that a failure to allow emotional support animals amounts to illegal disability discrimination under the Fair Housing Act. So here's what's really going to happen, okay? If these landlords are smart, they will just, you don't want to go to court for this. You don't want to lose everything you've got, right? So go and settle with HUD, apologize, plead guilty, or whatever it takes, right? Pay the little fine, pay the little fee, get this thing done. And, my suggestion is, if somebody comes up with an emotional support animal or whatever again, don't ever mention, that you're denying a tenant that animal or whatever, right? Just quietly reject them and be like, I found a better candidate, there's ways around having to deal with this sort of issue. And, the reason that people get caught up is because they say out loud the thing that they shouldn't be, if you don't want a tenant in there with emotional support animal, you just can't say out loud, well, I'm rejecting you because you have an emotional support animal. But what you can do is, I am rejecting you because I have better qualified tenants, and, end it at that. Okay? But anyway, let's get into this article. Federal housing officials are charging a pair of New York landlords with violating fair housing law for making no exceptions for emotional support animals in their no pets policy. On Monday, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development announced it had filed a complaint against Ronit and Voyle Tom Metcham, owners of a 2-unit rental property in Jamestown, New York, for denying a tenant's request to keep a cat on the premises. And like I was saying earlier, there's a little bit more to this story, and they're about to go into it right now. So, it's not as simple, okay, the tenant was denied, but, to me, this whole thing sounds like a cash grab from this tenant, okay, who is trying to get a payoff for a complete joke. But anyway, let's continue. The Metcham's tenant, whose name is redacted in the complaint, had requested in November 2021 that they be allowed to have the cat as part of the treatment they were receiving for unspecified mental health issues. The tenant said they would provide a doctor's note justifying the emotional support cat. In December, Tom Metcham told the tenant, who had been living on the property since February of 2021, that they would not allow a cat on the property, but they would allow them to get out of their lease early if they wished to move. The tenant's subsequent request for an exemption to the no pets policy went unanswered, according to the complaint. Eventually, in May of 2022, the tenant went ahead and acquired an emotional support cat anyway. That didn't appear to cause any immediate issues as the tenant continued to live at the Metcham's property through August of 2022. That month, the tenant informed the property owners that they were moving out. So the tenant asked the landlord if they could have the emotional support cat, right? And said, oh, I'll get a doctor's note. And the landlord said no, right? So the landlord never actually saw a doctor's note or any actual documentation saying that this tenant needed an emotional support cat, okay? So how would the landlord, if somebody just comes up to you and says, oh, I have cancer, and I need I'm disabled and I need a ramp, right? Well, I need documentation that you need a ramp before I come out here and spend thousands of dollars meeting your meeting your disability accommodation, okay? And the same goes for this emotional support animal thing. Before I allow an emotional support animal, you need to provide the documentation first. And nothing in this article says that these tenants actually provided the doctor's note saying that they needed a cat, okay? So, yeah, of course the landlord, the immediate reaction is to deny it. But then the tenant went ahead and got the cat anyway and lived in the property for months with their cat. So they got their cat anyway, yet they're still suing this landlord. And then they moved out. And there seemed to be no problem whatsoever. But anyway, let me continue because what happens next is quite interesting. Only during a move-out inspection did the issue of the cat resurface. According to the complaint, Ronit Mecham told the tenant she should have disclosed her mental health issue before moving in and should have moved out if she wanted a cat. That comment seems to have been the end of it. The HUD complaint says the tenant suffered emotional and physical distress as a result of the Mecham's discriminatory conduct, but doesn't list any other penalty they suffered. For HUD, that's nevertheless enough to qualify as illegal disability discrimination under the Fair Housing Act. So, according to the federal government, right, after the tenant voluntarily left, they had their emotional support cat for months on end, and the landlord had been was just like, hey, you should have disclosed that you had this mental health issue where you needed this cat. Well, that's discriminatory according to the federal government, okay? It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And, the fact that the landlord noticed something during the move-out inspection that signaled to them that there was a cat on the property tells me that the cat tore something up, okay? The cat, they probably went into the place and it stank. Okay, that's a big issue. You could smell that litter box from a mile away, or the walls have been sprayed with pee and, or whatever, right? Or there was cat hair everywhere. So you go into your apartment that, you own, your property that you own, and there's all this damage. You got to replace the carpet because the cat done peed all over the carpet. You got to get extra cleaning because there's cat hair everywhere, and you're spending hundreds of dollars extra to repair the stuff from this cat. And the tenant's like, oh, well, no, I shouldn't have to pay that because this is an emotional support cat and it's a medical issue. You see what the problem is? Regardless of whether this is an emotional support cat or not, if it causes damage, then we have a problem. That is exactly why landlords do not want these animals in their properties. Goodness. I mean, it's like the people who put these laws into place don't have any common sense. They think that these are magic animals that never cause damage at all. They don't act like a normal animal. They'll never pee on the floor because they're an emotional support cat. Okay, whatever. A complete joke, right? And this tenant now is claiming emotional distress. Emotional distress from what? She had the cat in the property. She got, she didn't even tell the landlord about it. She didn't pay anything extra. And then the landlord calls her out for the extensive damage during the move-out inspection. And then she calls up HUD and tries to get the federal government to sick the federal government on the landlord. This is a complete joke. This is awful. And you know what? This is the kind of stuff that, when we talk about government overreach, when we talk about stupid regulations, this is the sort of stuff I'm always talking about. And, I feel really, really bad for these. These are small mom and pop landlords. Like I said, pay whatever fees, pay whatever fines, whatever, right? But this is the sort of stuff that discourages landlords from wanting to be in the business in the first place. And that's why so many of them are selling and getting out of the business.